Welcome once more to our series of physiology concepts. We just finished talking about passive membrane transport. Now we're going to look at the active membrane transport. So this is a reminder of what happens in active membrane transport. Energy is required. The cell has to use some of its ATP. Why is this? Because we are trying to move substances against their concentration gradient, which means I'm moving substances from lower to higher concentration, which is the opposite of the norm. This is why the cell has to use ATP. We are going to look at the different mechanisms, the ionic pumps first, and then we're going to look at the vesicular transport. We're going to look at the mechanism of exocytosis, endocytosis with its two parts of phagocytosis and pinocytosis. So this is the ionic pump. This is the biggest and very important example here. We are looking at the sodium potassium pump. So where is this pump located? It's actually located on the plasma membrane, as you can see, my lipid bilayer here. Before talking about this pump, I need to remind you that in the extracellular fluid, sodium is always in higher concentration. So I have a higher concentration of sodium over here. In the intracellular fluid, I always have a higher concentration of potassium. So let's see what the pump is doing. The pump is going to transport 3 sodium ions from inside to outside, which means I am moving them against the concentration gradient from an area of lower concentration to higher concentration. In order to do this, the pump has to use ATP. So the 3 sodium molecules are going to move into the pump and eventually be ejected outside to the extracellular fluid. At the same time, the pump is going to take 2 potassium ions and bring them inside the cell. And this is why, as I keep reminding you, we have to use ATP. Now, this pump is very active in certain areas of the body where excitation occurs along nerve and muscle cells. When a signal comes to a nerve or a muscle cell, sodium will go in the cell, potassium will leave the cell in a certain sequence, and we have to bring the normal concentration back again. Who does this? Our sodium potassium pump. So as a reminder, the sodium potassium pump will take 3 sodium ions and move them outside the cell, bring 2 potassium ions inside the cell. This is to make sure that sodium concentration is always going to be higher in the extracellular fluid and potassium is going to be higher in the intracellular fluid. The second mechanism is the vesicular transport. So we are moving substances in vesicles, in small containers. Large particles move by vesicular transport, and we have 2 different types. In exocytosis, we are removing particles from inside the cell out. In endocytosis, we are bringing substances from outside the cell in, and we are going to talk about phagocytosis, which is cell eating, and pinocytosis, which is cell drinking. This is how exocytosis occurs. So if this cell is secreting something to the outside, commonly enzymes, commonly different proteins have to go outside the cell. How does the cell move those substances? Hormones as well is one important example. It's going to move those substances in a vesicle, and we see that the vesicle will eventually get very close to the plasma membrane, linked to it, it opens, and now exocytosis occurs. If the cell is trying to take something in, it's a large particle. Again, part of the plasma membrane builds a vesicle, and this vesicle is transported in. The two entities of endocytosis, phagocytosis is cell eating, and this is a very important concept by which our immune cells destroy pathogens. So if this is one of our body cells, and this is a pathogen like a small microbe, there's going to be extension from the plasma membrane that will make sort of pseudopods surrounding the pathogen. It's going to pull it in, and it made a vesicle, as you can see here. So this is my vesicular transport. This vesicle is now going to be attacked by the lysosome. It's going to break down, and then the remains, the residual material, is going to be removed or ejected out of the cell by exocytosis. So you can see endocytosis occurring on this side, exocytosis occurring on the other side. And again, this is a concept that is used by our immune cells every and each hour of the day. Pinocytosis is cell drinking. So the cells, most of the body cells, will take small droplets of water from the extracellular fluid with some of the dissolved substances and bring them in the cell in a vesicle. Why do they do this? It's the cell wanting to know what exactly surrounds it. So the cell is aware of the surroundings, and this occurs in most of our human body cells. And this concludes our discussion on active membrane transport, and thank you for joining us.